Order. I'd like to call the meeting of the Law Amendments Committee to order, March the 11th, 2019. Welcome, everybody. We have 8 bills today to consider. I'd just like to remind everybody that flash photography other than the media is not allowed, and unlike some active engagements, open applause is not permitted either. Flash photography. Any photography. I'm giving my legal advice here. Any photography is not allowed. Cell phones should be put to vibrate also. So I'll start with introductions, starting with our NDP, Ms. Roberts.
He got me.
Ms. Roberts. They'll get it for you. There you go.
Lisa Roberts, I am the MLA for Halifax Needham. Nice to be with you.
Good afternoon. I'm Claudia Chender, the MLA for Dartmouth South.
Tory Rushton, MLA for Cumberland South.
John Lohr, MLA for Kings North.
Rafa Di Costanzo, MLA for Clayton Park West.
Suzanne Lomas-Croft, MLA Lunenburg.
Good afternoon. Keith Irving, MLA Kings South.
Hugh McKay, MLA for Chester St. Margaret's, subbing for Brendan McGuire, MLA of Halifax Atlantic.
And I'm Gordon Wilson. I'm the MLA for Clare Digby. So again, welcome everybody. Our first 5 bills that we have no representation. So Bill 84, the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary Appreciation Act. The Bill 90, the Boxing Authority Act amended. Bill 91, the Nova Scotia Museum Act, Bill 95, the Emergency 911 Act amended, and Bill 97, the Credit Union Act amended. Those bills have no representation, and if it is the favor of the committee, we would ask for a motion to move those to the House. Ms. Chender. The other Ms. Chender. There we go.
Thank you. I would move that we move through these bills separately because we do have a couple of motions on some of these bills.
Certainly. We'll start with Bill 84, the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary Appreciation Act. Mr. Irvin. Mr. Irvin. Hansard they'll get it straightened out here in a few minutes. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that Bill number 84, the Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary Appreciation Act, be referred back to the House without amendment.
All those in favor, say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. Bill 84, Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary Appreciation Act, will be referred back to the House with no amendments. Bill number 90, the Boxing Authority Act, amended. Ms. Di Costanzo.
Thank you. I move that the Bill 90, Boxing Authority Act, will be referred back to the House.
Without amendment.
Oh, without amendment, sorry.
All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion's carried. Bill number 90, the Boxing Authority Act, will be referred back to the House with no amendments. Bill number 91, the Nova Scotia Museum Act. Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 91, Nova Scotia Museum Act, be referred back to the House without amendment.
Ms. Chender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It will have come to the attention of everyone on this committee that we received correspondence from the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner regarding this bill. She is of the opinion in her reading of the Act that unlike the existing legislation, this amendment would make this act less subject to the parameters of the FOIPOP legislation. I understand that there's some confusion about whether or not that's the case, but confusion does not good legislation make. And so we have drafted an amendment, but let's play a little game of choose your own adventure. To start with, I would make a motion that we send this back to the department to make sure that they've clarified this with the Information and Privacy Commissioner and made the necessary changes. So I'd like to move that motion.
So there's a motion on the floor. Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yes, we've reviewed the letter from the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, and the department has reached out to her as well. It seems there's just been a bit of confusion on the language of Article 5.1 in reviewing it just before this meeting with Ledge Council. It does not seem to be too ambiguous. The Government Council shall appoint at least 5 and not more than 13 members of a Board of Governors for a term of not more than 3 years. The Privacy Commissioner's letter seems to say that she has interpreted that 5 of 13 members, and so I think we can get that clarified with the department going back to the Privacy Commissioner, and if we can't get that clarified, then I'd suggest that amendment come forward during Committee of the Whole. But at this time, I think we're good to go with the text that we've got here.
Any, Ms. Chender?
That would be acceptable. The amendment that we have here, which I know that my colleagues will not vote for, so I will not put it forward, but spoiler alert, in case we get to the next phase of this bill, would just be to add this to the schedule of acts that for greater certainty are covered by the FOIPOP legislation, so we can hold that. But hopefully there will be some clarification with Ms. Tully's office, and hopefully next time her office will be consulted in advance of the bill being put forward and not in the middle.
Okay. So are you withdrawing your motion?
No, let's vote on it.
Okay. So the motion is to refer the bill back to the department for clarification. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Nay. Motion defeated. We still have a bill here, bill number 91, the Museums Act. Mr. McKay?
Yes, I've made the motion, Mr. Chair, I move that Bill 91, Nova Scotia Museum Act, be referred back to the House without amendment.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion's carried. Bill number 91, the Nova Scotia Museum Act, will be referred back to the House without changes. Bill number 95, the Emergency 911 Act amended. Ms. Suzanne Lonis-Croft.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We just received a little bit before the meeting, and we would like time to review. So,
911.
oh, sorry, I thought it was 97. Sorry.
Ms. D. Costanzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
A lot of bills on the table.
I move Bill number 95, Emergency 911 Act, to be referred back to the House without amendment. Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion carried. Bill number 95, the Emergency 911 Act amended, will be moved back to the House without amendments. Bill number 97, the Credit Union Act amended. Ms. Suzanne Lonis-Croft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This time, we would like more time to review this, so I'd like to make a motion to defer this to another meeting of law amendments.
So there's a motion on the floor to move Bill number 97, the Credit Union Act amended, to a law of amendment meeting in the future. All those in favor, please say aye. Contrary minded, nay. Motion's carried. Bill number 97, Credit Union Act amended, will be moved to a future law amendment committee meeting. Bill number 92, the Municipal Government Act amended, and the Halifax Regional Municipal Charter. We have 3 presenters, and John Travis, Counsel for Halifax Regional Municipality, is our first. Is Mr. Travis here? Come forward. So we have 10 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for questions. I can give you a 2-minute warning if you want, or just keep an eye on your time. I will and let you know. Welcome. The floor is yours. It's fairly relaxed when we get into the questions. So you're on the clock. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Traves. I am Halifax Regional Municipality's solicitor, and I am Director of Legal, Municipal Clerk's Office, and External Affairs. And I won't take 10 minutes, but thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak today on Bill 92. On behalf of Halifax Regional Council, I'd like to thank Minister Porter and the government for bringing forward this bill, and in particular, I'd like to thank Mark Peck in the department for his consultation and discussions around this bill, which the municipality feels is quite important. These changes are a welcome step in our mutual work with the province to modernize municipal legislation and to reduce administrative red tape. Replacing Section 79 of the HRM Charter, which limits municipal spending to specific areas on a list, will eliminate several outstanding legislative requests from Council by removing the need to seek legislative authority year after year for areas of expenditure not specifically thought of when this list was first put together and developed, but which no one really takes issue with in terms of allowing a municipality, particularly as mature as Halifax, or allowing them to serve the purposes for which the municipality was established. This legislation addresses the principal aspects of HRM's request for municipal natural person powers. Natural person powers takes the same permissive approach to legislation, delegating to Council a broad authority to spend in any areas related to the municipal mandate. To this end, it is very helpful to see language as well clarifying the purposes of the municipality, something which, quite frankly, makes a lot of common sense in terms of setting out what is the purpose of a municipality, separate and apart from a conversation around what is the purpose of the legislation which establishes the municipality. And so this bill will enable the municipality to better support individuals and nonprofit organizations. It will give HRM more opportunity to explore innovative programs and service delivery and provides greater flexibility to respond to citizen needs. We're fully supportive of this legislation. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Ms. Roberts.
Thank you for your presentation, and we too are broadly very supportive of these changes. I did hear sort of through some of my municipal contacts that there are some concerns about changes to the Act related to the possibility of making capital grants to hospitals. And I wonder if you can speak to, I guess, to Clause 6, 7, and 16 and 17, which deal with that, the power of a municipality to make grants to hospitals. Of course, hospitals generally, I think we all understand in Nova Scotia are provincial responsibilities, and I am not quite clear at this point is this old I'm not clear why this is in this Act. So I'd like you to speak to that if you can.
I would say traditionally that the shopping list of items that a municipality could spend on did not include financing what would be seen or argued to be provincial undertakings and responsibilities. And so there are certain areas where municipalities, not necessarily Halifax, but including Halifax, may choose to spend on. This is enabling legislation, in effect, which does not require an expenditure of that nature, but it makes it clear that whether or not one would argue that it is a purpose of the municipality, it may be in a municipality's interest to choose to spend on this sort of activity on hospitals. As between, and I can see that particularly in more rural areas where there may be a desire of a municipality to maintain existing infrastructure or to attract other infrastructure, and it may result in a negotiation or a discussion with the government along those lines. And so I look at it, quite frankly, as permissive, but I understand that there are some questions and concerns potentially from other municipalities as to, where would this potentially lead to? But it is permissive in the sense that the language says they may spend.
From your awareness, when this legislation was being developed and there was conversation back and forth with the Federation of Municipalities, was this discussed, or was this a surprise to see in the legislation?
I'm sorry, I'm not a party to those discussions in the sense that my discussions have taken place with the department vis-a-vis HRM's
Right.
interest in natural person powers.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Smith-McCrossan.
Does the committee have a statement from the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities president on this amendment?
You're asking the chair? To my knowledge, they're appearing, yes,
Oh, okay.
as witnesses.
They'll be after this?
They're number 3.
Okay, perfect.
Ms. Chender.
Thank you.
You guys are going to have to switch chairs, that's all.
So further to my colleague's questioning, did the issue of hospital funding ever come up in your conversations with the department on this bill?
Yes, I was aware that it was there. The process in terms of discussions is relatively short. I understand that the government's interest in moving this forward, it doesn't always lead to the same sort of degree of discussion, but I was made aware there would be something to that effect in there, yes.
And did you have I mean, I know you've said it's permissive. You can understand our concern, which is that we have huge issues with our hospitals around the province, and there are many of us in opposition who feel like they're not being addressed properly. And therefore, when we see what looks a little bit like an out to get other sources of funding to stem the gap that exists essentially in an area of exclusively provincial jurisdiction, it does raise some flags. So I wonder if you did that raise any flags for you in those conversations?
I would, Mr. Chair, I would suggest this. I think municipalities are mature enough organizations. They are represented by elected officials that they should not be prevented from, making decisions that they feel are in the best interests of their constituents, and that may be spending on hospitals, what have you. And if you don't have this in there, it's hard to argue that it is a core municipal purpose. It isn't. That's not to say that an elected body at the municipal level may feel the desire, to go there. The challenge is that there can be pressure in terms of going in that direction, but I think most municipalities, know the local lay of the land, as it were, and will make these decisions for themselves in the same way that these broader powers to spend, have checks and balances. Those checks and balances apply in the same manner. There needs to be money in the budget to pay for these sorts of things, and it has to be weighed against other priorities. And I think most municipal politicians are aware of that.
Thanks, and just one last follow-up, which is, in your opinion, as the head lawyer for the city, would the city have had would HRM have had the ability to spend without this explicitly permissive piece in this legislation? Could they have just done it anyway?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay.
In the sense that I don't see it, it would be, it's arguable. It's one of those things that we would rather not be open to a challenge on, in the sense of saying, the municipality has decided to spend here. Traditionally, it has been seen as something outside of a municipal purpose. But, I temper that by saying we now have a new section dealing with what is the municipal purpose, and it is intended to be, as it should be, interpreted quite broadly. And so I could see it, essentially going both ways under this new legislation, but clarity doesn't hurt, frankly. Thank you.
Ms. Smith-McCrossan?
Thank you. And the reason I asked if there was someone here from the Nova Scotia Federation is because I had read their statement initially supporting this amendment completely. And I reached out to the president to ask, does that mean that he supported, or did the NSFM support what my colleagues to the right have brought up? The fact that in this amendment, it allows for an area rate to be added for construction of a hospital. And in fact, I did receive communication from the president this morning that they do have concerns over that. So I wanted just to make sure that NSFM did have an opportunity to present their concerns. I know that it does fall under provincial jurisdiction, but I know in our area in Cumberland North, there was several new schools built in the last number of years. And in each case, even though education is provincial jurisdiction, the schools were not built large enough So the municipalities added an area rate so that the gymnasiums were built to a larger size. And I think this is a bit of a surprise now that municipalities possibly will be asked to increase their property taxes by adding an area rate for the construction of hospitals. So it is a concern, and I don't think municipalities budget for that capital cost. So it's certainly important to be aware of that.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts? Excuse me.
I'm taking advantage of the lawyer at the table to try to understand.
There's more than one.
So housing has also been, you know, back in the 90s, we agreed that the province was responsible for housing. I know that Halifax Regional Municipality has been interested in engaging more actively with housing, and as are a number of other municipalities across the province whom I've spoken with. But there's no reference to specifically allowing or enabling municipalities to spend on housing in this legislation. So can you explain to me why it would be seen as necessary to be explicit about allowing municipalities to make capital grants to a hospital, but it's not explicit that a municipality may make capital grants to affordable housing development?
Sorry, Mr. Chair.
It's okay.
Well, that's a good question. You know, and it comes back to, you know, the interpretation of what is the purpose of the municipality. And housing has been a challenge for a number of years at several different levels, whether it's, you know, the opportunity to remain in aging in place, or simply as a respect of some of the direction and desire the municipal and the province has around affordable housing and density bonusing. And so we're already active in the sort of housing area things, and I think it's hard to argue that there isn't a municipal purpose already when it comes to housing and that sort of aspect. What's missing, I think, at some level is some level of discussion between the municipalities and the province around who will undertake to manage the housing stock and in what way. The expenditure side of it and the money side of it I'm less concerned about. It's probably more around the lines of, you know, what is the appropriate role for Housing Nova Scotia, or, you know, in HRM's context, is there a role for an HRM specific housing authority of some sort in either as a partnership or, you know, from our perspective, led by the province in effect. And so the funding aspect of that, you know, ties in many cases with the municipal purposes. It's, I think, a harder stretch to look at, you know, the medical side of thing in housing, but there are some areas there where we look at end of life and hospices, which I think HRM was proud to support, as were a number of others more recently with respect to a grant, in terms of the impact that has on all of our residents and the quality of life that we face all the way through to, you know, that end of life care.
Thank
that
you.
Answers.
Mr. McKay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I look in my own constituency of beautiful Chester St. Margaret's and note on several occasions where various levels of government have worked together to leverage the funding available to them. I can look at roads that are a provincial responsibility, yet the municipality has paid for wide paved shoulders, or I can look at schools that, again, as my colleague has mentioned, are a provincial responsibility, but have become community schools where there are community resources added, and maybe a gymnasium or a theater or a community resource center. And I would think that leveraging things in the medical world, in our healthcare, is also helpful, not in the sense of downloading responsibilities, but in leveraging funds. If there are things that a municipality in our community, in our province, would like to do to leverage off provincial funds, I think this is an excellent bill to support allowing that. Would you agree with that? Finally, a question.
It's a leading question.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Chair,
Taking advantage of you, as my colleague said.
A leading answer as somebody who negotiates on behalf of the municipality, I think starting from an expectation that, you know, the federal and the federal monies and provincial, responsibilities take precedent, I could see an opportunity for a municipality to upsize beyond what might otherwise be available in terms of that, as opposed to perhaps the more traditional cost sharing amongst. And it just comes down to fiscal capacity and some of the challenges of municipalities. But to the same example before around, lifelong learning centers and gymnasiums, provided that the underlying expectations are met in terms of that there is a gym and it is sufficient, I see nothing wrong with the municipality saying, look, we want to contribute towards getting something that we would not otherwise be able to have if it were not for a municipal contribution. And that's a choice that they have. Yeah. But thank you.
Thank you.
Unless we are going over a little bit on time, just one quick, Ms. McCrossan maybe then.
Certainly, I just wanted to follow up on the
discussion.
downloading versus leveraging. That's interesting. Do you have any concerns about the quote-unquote leveraging of the cost of broadband internet for the municipalities?
Not offhand, no.
Okay.
Thank you all very much, and thank you, Mr. Travis, for your discussion here. Michelle Raymond. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi.
And again, I'll have the page can send those around. Thank you very much. And again, we'll have 10 minutes for presentation and 5 for questions. Actually, it just went the opposite the last time,
yeah,
but
okay.
The floor is yours.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry, you said 5 minutes for presentation?
10 for presentation and 5 for questions.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. And I appreciate very much the opportunity to be here. This is not a place where I've sat before, but I feel especially privileged because the Nova Scotia Legislative Amendments Committee is something which is, I think, unique in Canada, and I think we're extraordinarily lucky to have that, which is not unconnected with the reason that I'm here. I think this is a bill which probably has not been closely regarded by a number of people. It has a very dusty feel about it, Bill 92, and it's an amendment to the Municipal Government Act, and it's an amendment to the Halifax Regional Municipality Act. I, in fact, wasn't paying a great deal of attention to it until I actually stumbled upon the context and the background with which the Halifax Regional Municipality, in which the municipality is putting this forward. I'm a resident of the municipality, and as such, I do have concerns. And since half of the population of this province lives in the Halifax Regional Municipality, and it covers an area bigger than Prince Edward Island, I think that this is going to have significant effects for a large part of the province and also for other municipalities. The thing that really brings me here, though, is the fact that the issue of natural person powers, and that possibility, I believe, was raised by Mr. Houston in the House, that this is an approach to natural person powers, as Mr. Traves has pointed out. But natural person powers are a very, very different approach to governance than is the traditional one by which a municipality exercises the powers it has been given by the provincial government. We have a Canadian Constitution which divides powers between the federal government and the provincial government. It gives the federal government the powers of specifically peace, order, and good government. And that's a description of a very broad and residual category of powers. That means if it can't be done by the province, or that means that it's left to the federal government if it hasn't been enumerated in provincial powers. So frankly, I have a question. What does it mean to give a municipality, which is a creature of the province, or has been, to give it the powers?
Ms. Raymond,
I'm sorry.
You don't have to lean into the mic. It's distorting.
Sorry.
Just sit back and relax. Sorry.
I'm usually told that I'm too far away. I
Didn't
apologize.
mean to interrupt.
Okay. So what this bill is really going to do is to fundamentally alter the relationships between citizens and HRM and it's going to fundamentally alter relationships between HRM and the province. It's going to remove a lot of provincial oversight, and it's going to allow for the broad interpretation of municipal powers as opposed to the restrictive ones. Now, when this was brought to municipal affairs by the municipality, I think it was first in 2013, the municipal affairs, the provincial department, asked for various things, including some evidence of public consultation. What I see, though, and which is really very concerning, is that the public consultation consisted, yes, consultations with, it looks like about 285 business interests of various sizes, and the posting on a website in April 2017, 2 years ago, of a brief survey, questionnaire, so that they got 196 responses out of 450,000 citizens. And to me, this means that 99.96% of the population of the municipality had nothing to say, may not even have been aware of it. And if you want to participate in this particular exercise, you actually have to get yourself, I would say, credentialed. The municipality, and again, this is not unconnected with the substance of this bill, is moving more and more to an online model of consultation. And that is really a very exclusionary model for large numbers of people. Not everybody deals by preference with websites, and even those who do don't actually prefer to register their email address, their gender identity, if they can do it in less than 255 characters, or what, and their age and all the rest of it. They don't have to do all that, but they can. And I guess a real question would be, how relevant are these things to the discussions of whether a municipality has broad powers or has to justify the exercise of its powers? I've given you this report, and I hope that you'll have a chance to look through it, because what it'll show you is that out of that 0.04% of the municipal population who answered, a large number of those people didn't want to see natural person powers, and they didn't want to see unrestricted borrowing powers. The bill which is before you actually talks about the shifting, the ability to shift, as I understand it. You have to forgive me, I'm not a lawyer, but as I read this, what I see is the ability to shift funds out of an operating budget to a capital budget ad hoc. And I don't think that this is something that can happen at the provincial level, but I guess it would be able to at the municipal level. Ad hoc for capital expenditures, and presumably what's left when your operating budget is empty is that you do need to borrow to plow the streets or whatever the case may be, because you've spent the money on a capital budget. That's what that appears to be. So there are some questions around financing, but some of my biggest questions are actually around transparency. I mean, we're assured that the transparency of the municipality is not to be, we're to be entirely satisfied with that transparency. But if this consultation is a model of transparency and of public participation, then I think that the 450,000 people of the municipality really ought to be concerned. In the smaller and more rural municipalities, it's not an issue. But where you have such a concentration of individuals and of also industry, commerce, and government, that's going to be a problem. We're assured about existing practices for in-camera meetings being regulated by the Charter, although there are concerns about that. There is not a great deal of proposal for expanded municipal transparency beyond a broad requirement to adopt a policy about disclosing the recipients of grants. We are being told that, in fact, that the direct granting ability is something which is being sought. I have some questions around what's presented as nonprofit, but then there's a question about charitable for-profit. I have no idea what that is. This would be a moment for me to inject my particular concern about lobbying requirements. The province and the federal government have existing lobbyist registries. That's not true at the municipal level, and in fact, it looks as though citizens have to get themselves credentialed if they want to participate in the process, but there is no credentialing for lobbyists. This is going to really affect, as I say, fundamentally the lives of citizens. It's going to allow for the shifting of budgeting powers and the taxation rates. It is done in the face of considerable concern. If you look at the surveys included here, it's done in the face of considerable concern about the picking of winners and losers at both at the private and at the public level. And I think it may also be done in the face of concerns about capital expenditures, which are the matters of lively debate, and which at this moment have to be brought to the province for a form of endorsement. We're having, there are large concerns about the institution of a stadium and of tax increment funding. And it perturbs me, in fact, in these background reports to see that there's a reference to where HRM hasn't received the requisite enabling legislation for initiative leading to the municipality in the past. In other cases where HRM has not received the requisite enabling legislation for initiative leading the municipality to find an alternate way to implement it that's less transparent, this does not inspire confidence. If, in fact, the municipality no longer, and I'm speaking again of the Halifax Regional Municipality primarily because it is such a very large proportion of the province, if there is no longer a need to even seek legislative authorization for these major initiatives, then what does happen? We already have the municipality talking about a workaround of tax increment financing and convoluted arrangements. Those things are already possible. To say you don't even need to bother with this is a licensing that I think should be granted very carefully by the provincial government, and I believe that if you consulted with your constituents, you would find that they actually appreciate the participation of a couple of levels of government. So with that, I'll close. And any questions?
Thank you very much. No questions? No? You presented a lot of answers, I think, in your comments, so maybe that's helped because we don't. Mr. Lohr?
Well, thank you for your presentation, and Michelle, I'm very interested in natural person's powers and trying to get an understanding of what that is. But what I read in your documents a definition that says that a natural person can give loans to another person, buy shares in a company, buy and use property for any purpose. Things which HRM, so those are all things which HRM cannot currently do but will be able to do with natural person's power. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, what I've done is I've brought you some questions about the background document, municipality's background document. So as I understand it, these are the things that for which the municipality is seeking natural person powers ultimately. Yes. So that would be the municipality's read on it. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, are you a lawyer, or do you have a?
No, I'm not. No.
And maybe this is, I just feel like
I have not practiced as a lawyer. No, this is something which came to my attention on Friday as I was looking for something else for somebody else, and it was about tax increment funding and financing, and it's like, oh gosh, look at all of this. So I'm sorry that I haven't had the time to research it further.
Ms. Smith-McCrossan?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, and I will look forward to reading through this document in its entirety this evening. I'm wondering is there any one thing in particular that you have a concern about? And I'm curious in particular on the top of page 2, you've identified the CFL Stadium as one thing. Is that something that you are concerned about, that this amendment opens up for taxpayer dollars to be used for
I think it quite possibly does, and it is a big concern, actually. There seems to be some lack of clarity about private and provincial, private and public, and also the fact that non-profit. I'm not sure what a for-profit charitable entity is, and so on. So I think we need to get that kind of thing clarified. But yes, the stadium is really top of mind for an awful lot of people. So, and I think it needs full investigation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Freeman. I appreciate your comments at the start. A lot of people do not recognize that this is a privilege to have Law Amendments Committee.
Very much so, and thank you.
No, good comments. Mayor Jeff Cantwell, Town of Wolfville, who is the chair of the Town Caucus for the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities. So welcome, Mr. Cantwell. So again, we have 10 minutes for presentation and 5 for questions, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, neighbors. Yes, I won't be 10 minutes. Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Cantwell. I'm the mayor of the town of Wolfville, but today I'm appearing before this committee as a board member of the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities. Our board president, Wei Mason, and the CEO, Juanita Spencer, are currently out of the province attending the Federation of Canadian Municipalities board meeting and have asked that I present on their behalf. The Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities is the voice of the province's 50 municipal units. We represent 379 members comprised of mayors, wardens, and councillors. On behalf of our members, we are pleased to speak in support of Bill 92. Bill 92 will provide Nova Scotia municipalities with a greater degree of autonomy in how they spend their money. Current legislation is very prescriptive and limits municipal capacity to address the needs of their citizens in a timely fashion. Whenever municipalities wish to spend money, they must first confirm their purchase is permitted under a defined list of approved expenditures in the Municipal Government Act or Halifax Charter. Anything outside this list requires legislative approval, and this process takes time. It is our position that there are already satisfactory checks and balances in place to maintain transparency and accountability to the public while allowing for greater flexibility in responding to the needs of their citizens with Bill 92. The NSFM does wish to flag one minor note of concern. The amendments, as they now read, propose allowing municipalities to make capital grants to a hospital to which the Hospitals Act applies. The Federation has not consulted with our members regarding this potential change in discretionary spending powers for hospitals, something that has been an entirely provincial responsibility since municipal reform in the 1990s. We ask this change be removed from the bill until such time as there has been a thorough consultation with the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities and our members occurs. When considering powers to expend, the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities would like to acknowledge that we and our members were consulted by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and his team last summer. We are always pleased when government consults with us and acts in the spirit of the partnership framework of 2016. This bill will make it easier for municipalities to invest in things like broadband internet or green energy infrastructure and to partner with private organizations. These are the kinds of initiatives that will help our communities to be strong and vibrant and help us have more sustainable local government. We want our municipalities to be ready to move at the speed of business to seize economic and social opportunities. We truly see this as an important part of a path to municipal modernization, and we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Cantwell. Any questions? Ms. Roberts.
Can you share any more of, I guess, your thoughts coming from, you know, the town's caucus, your concerns regarding the amendments that would allow municipalities to make capital grants to a hospital?
Well, I can just speaking, I guess, from my perspective, at least from the town of Wolfville, and representing all the towns. There are some towns who I'm sure would see this as an opportunity to attract, be it other residents. There are going to be people I see. One of the ideas I see is a possibility of kind of like a quasi-intermunicipal service agreement between a region, if you will, of municipalities who may choose to augment the services already provided and provide a grant for capital grants, if they so chose. I don't see it as a mandate for us to do that. I think there would be some pretty significant pushback if it was decided that it was mandated that we contribute.
Thank you. Ms. Smith-McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Was the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities consulted about the addition of changing the area rate for possible capital costs of hospitals?
I'm not going to say that, at least in our particular area, the town's caucus, we were not. And at the board level, with respect to changing the area rate, that to me, and I think I speak on behalf of the board, is again, it goes to, I don't see it as a mandate. We're not being directed to. We have the ability to, if it's seen as leveraging, if you will, as the term was used earlier. Semantics, maybe. However, I see it as an opportunity. We have, just to further on that, we have a situation in rural Canada, not just rural Nova Scotia, where there's an out migration. People are centralizing to the capital, to the core. And there are areas in southwest Nova and Cape Breton and the north of the province, all over, where they'd probably like to draw and make it more attractive. Everything seems to be in the city. Well, this is a way that we have, should we choose, should they, and that's what I mentioned, the type of intermunicipal service agreements where we can say, hey, we need a piece of that. And may, if they wish, under this new legislation, where before we didn't have the opportunity. We
Do
now
you
have
think
that opportunity.
your citizens would have concerns about an increase in taxation?
Oh, no. Absolutely, everybody does. But it goes to good governance. There's an accountability factor every 4 years that allows the citizens, if they are not in favor, they have that, and that goes back to the 196 representatives of the 450,000. Those who choose to be engaged will be, but the people expect good governance, and they want it. And it is up to the if we keep a federation keeps pressing towards we want more autonomy. We want to be treated as partners. Peers might be a little strong, but it is that linkage, I think, that we need. And to do that, some of that flexibility in allowing us to either leverage or attract other residents to our particular areas, and younger people who want to, be able to attract them to be able to come in and drive our economy forward. I see it as a positive step.
Mr. Lower.
Thank you, and good to see you, Mayor.
Hey, John.
I guess my question for you is, would there be a concern that the ability to make capital grants to hospitals and to apply an area rate would maybe pit one municipal unit against another, and a unit with deeper pockets, maybe a larger tax base, would be more able to do that than a municipal unit that didn't have the tax base or the revenue to get into that type of funding? Do you see that happening, that there would be a competitive, which is a concern of mine, but would you see that?
I see how it could happen. I would like to think that those, you'd be pitting that, would be neighbors of each other, being one can't afford it or another can't afford it. And I see that as something that will allow municipalities to collaborate further and allow them to engage as partners and collaborators and help raise the, all of us raise the bar a little higher.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. I want to clarify a little, because the written submission from the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities says, quote, "The Federation has not consulted with our members regarding this potential change in discretionary spending powers for hospitals, something that has been entirely provincial responsibility since municipal reform in the 1990s. We ask this change be removed from the bill until such time as there has been a thorough consultation with the NSFM and the members." But in your comments, you're sort of categorizing it as an opportunity. So are you, I guess, supportive of this call for this change to be removed, which is what I understood the written submission to be asking for?
And it is. They would like to have it, if you say removed, until there's been further consultation. Right. So to understand that better, what exactly that means, and it's my belief hopefully we're looking from a perspective of not so much the downloading or the mandating of those grants, capital grants, but the opportunity to use them if a region so desires. Right now, we don't have that opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Irvin?
Thank you. We can get caught up in this language, and I think I need a bit of research here in terms of Hospital Act, because municipalities such as the town of Wolfville has contributed to capital projects such as the Valley Regional Hospice. I think there's other municipalities that have, I believe down in the chair's area, to create their own collaborative care center. Those are opportunities that municipalities have sought out to support because they see the value added to their communities. And if government's not able to put a collaborative care center in Clare somewhere, I think it was, municipalities are asking for that opportunity to step up and make contributions. Is that a fair statement?
And I think that's where I was going, Mr. Irving, before, is in the fact that if regions within the province choose to kind of gather together, as we did with the Valley Hospice, there was an appeal to the member municipalities in the Valley who stepped up and funded that. I see that as an opportunity to enhance rural Nova Scotia and allow and regionally to allow us to again use the leveraging of dollars. But that's with my glass as well, usually half full, but I see it as a positive step. Again, the caveat, with further consultation, yes. And that more for clarity and definition.
Ms. Smith-McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the minister presented this amendment to the bill, he spoke a lot about broadband internet. And most of us here know, throughout rural Nova Scotia, many residents are without access to adequate broadband internet. I am curious about your thoughts representing NSFM. Do you have concerns about the province leveraging, as my colleague from Chester St. Margaret calls it, or downloading the costs of broadband internet to municipalities in the province?
Do I have a concern over it? Mm-hmm. Oh, I think if we're going to get it, I think a lot of that cost is going to have to be borne by municipal units. And already in our area, I know Kings County has stepped up to, I think, John, you can probably correct me, but $7 or $8 million loan. Annapolis has taken out another, what I would consider, based on Wolfville's tiny little budget, considerable monies for infrastructure to do that. But again, I think we have to. We pay for our own infrastructure with respect to sewer and water, roads, at least in towns, and those up to the J class. We take care of those. And to me, is that downloading? People choose to. They want to live. They want that peace and serenity of being able to see those stars at night and the quiet of living in the country. And not to get too urbanized, but they want those services. So, and if we're going to, where so much business is being done from the home occupation, and so on, I think it's incumbent upon us to enter into these agreements and help if we're going to put them, if we're going to do business at the speed of business.
So many residents are paying for broadband internet now, and they're not receiving the service, or maybe they're only receiving a percentage of what they should be receiving based on what they're paying. I would think a lot of citizens would be concerned that they're going to have to pay that, and in addition, pay through their property taxes for adequate internet. And when you're looking at economic development throughout rural Nova Scotia, if we're going to attract people from away, retired professionals especially, and they can't access adequate internet, there is a responsibility for it to be improved. But my question is, can municipalities afford it? And can citizens afford to have their taxes increased to have infrastructure for that? And it's just something I was wondering if the municipalities, if the NSFM is concerned about further costs being downloaded or leverage, as my friend calls it.
And to be fair, I think we're all concerned about it. Excessive downloading or increased taxes. Everybody, we all are responsible for those. I'll go to the broadband in particular, since you referenced that. We, through utilities, be it sewer and water, pay for our usage. For those, I'm speaking from towns. In rurals, it may be different depending on how they're serviced. But from towns, we pay a sewer rate, we pay a water rate to get those services delivered to our home, and what we would call good water, chlorine. It meets the Canadian standards and the provincial standards. The same thing, there are others out there who choose to live in an area where there is not municipal service water, and sometimes they run out, sometimes they don't have, sometimes there's E. coli issue, whatever the case may be. So they have issues. That's not great service, but they still have to pay a property tax. So I think if we're going to extend broadband services, they have to be competitive. If they're not competitive, they won't be used. And as technology grows, so personally, I don't see it as I see it as service delivery and cost for service. Yeah.
Thank you. That concludes our time, and I appreciate the conversation on that, Mayor Cantwell.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all.
So that concludes our witnesses for Bill number 92, the tourism. Ms. Roberts.
Given the submission from the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, I would like to move a change to Bill 92 to remove, delete, and renumber subsequent clauses accordingly. Delete clauses 6 and 7 on page 3, and to delete clauses 16 and 17 on page 5, and also renumber clauses accordingly. And you can see that on a change sheet which has been prepared, LAC NDP 1.
So we have an amendment brought forward, which is Amendment LAC NDP-1, which is page 3, clause 6 and 7, delete the renumber the sequences clauses accordingly, and page 5, clauses 16 and 17, delete and renumber subsequent clauses accordingly. Any discussion? Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to wade through this with respect to the documents that I have in front of me that says that clause 6 and 7 are preserving a power that the municipalities already have. So I'm wondering if I could have a recess for a moment to consult with my colleagues and
we'll take a brief recess.
Thank you.
Thank you. 5 minutes at the most. Okay, order. I call the committee back to order. Thank you very much for your patience in that. Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for the moment to get some clarification. We did consult with the department, and as per the descriptive clauses provided in the bill, these two clauses are actually preserving powers that currently exist in the MGA, and these were, in fact, the powers that were used to raise money for the hospice in Wolfville and presumably other projects. So we'll be voting against the amendment to remove those powers from the municipalities that they already have, and see no reason that the bill cannot go forward. Thank you.
Ms. Chender.
Thank you. I think we clearly have an issue with some ambiguity here because in the NSFM submission, they characterize this otherwise, and I did just ask the city solicitor whether he thought that the Halifax Regional Municipality had this power, and his response was no, and that he thought this needed to be there for certainty. So, I see that language as well, but I do think there's still some confusion here, and so we are supportive of moving this amendment forward.
Ms. Smith-McCrossan.
We support this amendment as presented because Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities was not consulted on this amendment. They have requested that it be removed until further consultation has been done. And if in fact municipalities can contribute to hospital projects such as a hospice and other, as they have in the past, then we don't believe that this amendment is necessary and would definitely recommend consultation with NSFM.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to LAC NDP 1. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Nay. Motion defeated. Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that Bill number 92, an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998 and the Municipal Government Act and Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Charter, Municipal Charter, be referred back to the House without amendment.
There's a motion to move the bill forward without amendment. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. Bill number 92, the Municipal Government Act amended and Halifax Regional Municipal Charter amended will move forward without amendments. We have Bill 101, the Tourism Accommodations Act, with 3 witnesses. I see our second witness is also coming forward for the last bill that we have, Bill 99. So if you don't mind, just for the sake of having her up and down, we'll go with number 4, then number 6 on the tourism accommodations, and bring Kathy Watson in at the. I believe it's Watson. Is it? Yes, Watson. Thank you. Okay, so William Stewart, Bill 101, the Tourism Accommodations Registration Act.
This is an error, is it, in your name?
Yeah. Mr. Stewart, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So we have 10 minutes for a presentation and 5 minutes for questions, and welcome here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stick to my written presentation here in order to cover all the main points. Thank you, committee, for allowing us the opportunity to present our perspective today. Today we have some observations and some suggestions to make concerning the Act itself and further consultation that has been referenced by the Minister in his announcement. While some of these suggestions may not pertain directly to the Act's revision, we hope that you may be able to provide advice to the Minister on areas of implementation where appropriate. You'll see that the title of my presentation is Short-Term Rentals and Neighborhood Perspective, and that's what I'd like to bring to this discussion here today. So looking at the first section here, short-term rental impact on neighborhoods and availability of affordable housing. To illustrate the impact allow me to give a brief history of how we got directly involved over the last few months. I say we, I'm talking mainly about my wife and other neighbors where I live. It may be similar to the experience that others have shared around the province, so I hope it's instructive. Our home is in the Hydrostone area in the north end of Halifax, and last summer one of our longtime residents passed away. The new owner indicated he loved the neighborhood and completed extensive renovations. We look forward to this new neighbor. However, in the fall, he told us that because of the revenue potential, he would open an Airbnb. He does not intend to reside in the neighborhood and also owns another Airbnb in Dartmouth. This was not good news for us and for many of our neighbors. We've lived in the Hydrostone area for 20 years, know many of our neighbors, some of whom own properties and some who are long-term renters. It's a very supportive and cooperative neighborhood. Many stay in touch regarding neighborhood events and occasions, such as street picnics and open house socials, and lend a hand to each other where needed. We think this kind of neighborhood makes for a safer community and an attractive, affordable place for small families to live. Presumably, that is why the new property owner found it attractive as well for short-term rentals. Sadly, it cannot stay a great neighborhood with only visitors. While there are a number of concerns with the increase in short-term rentals around the province, our primary concern is the loss of integrity and sustainability of neighborhoods. In short, we lose a neighbor that can add to our community as a resident and a citizen, as well as the security of knowing the people next to us. Some of our neighbors have already experienced disruption with late-night noise and arrivals and departures at all hours. Others are concerned about impact on property values as the number of short-term rental properties increase in their neighborhood. Along with sustaining neighborhoods is another issue that needs to be factored into the equation. Our neighborhood, like many others in the city or elsewhere around the province, needs to maintain an affordable housing stock. Our area is very attractive to couples and small families for both purchase and rental. Obviously, the short-term rental operation removes a property from the mix, but this is compounded by the potential of present property rental operations to convert to short-term rentals. That could be devastating to many neighborhoods. Looking at neighborhood and affordable housing perspective, and searching through various documents through our research, we found a lot. It was actually missing in the pre-act consultation. We have been, over the last 3 months, we've read far and wide about the experience of short-term rentals and how they impact communities here and elsewhere. And we've struggled to see what could be done. Essentially, after our research and communication, we realized that we, like other neighborhoods around the province, have a de facto hotel in our area. At this point, there is no resident owner. The property is a business, but has not been zoned as a business or taxed as such, and is not subject to standards of health and safety, insurance, and other requirements that might pertain to an actual hotel. We turn to the report of the working group on short-term rentals convened by the minister, on which portions of this new act are based. It was clear that the focus was not on neighborhood impact, but the regulatory framework around the tourism industry. To our knowledge, there were no community consultations focused on short-term rental impact on neighborhoods or availability of affordable housing. We have reached out to the Provincial Department of Business, Nova Scotia Housing, and HRM, as well as the tourism industry, to encourage discussion and legislation and to include local communities in that work. We're glad to see that legislation is now coming forth, but would recommend consultation on further refinement of the Act and regulations and implementations to be and consultation to be broader during the implementation phase. Relating now to the provisions of resident and non-resident short-term renters in the Act, as indicated in my earlier comments here, an important concern for our neighborhood, and no doubt many others, is the prevalence and rapid growth of short-term rentals, where owners who do not reside in the property being rented. In December 2018, the CBC reported there were approximately 3,800 short-term rental hosts in Nova Scotia, and 450 of these owned multiple properties and therefore were non-resident owners. We understand from our reading of Section 2 and 3 of the Act that non-resident owners will be required to register under the Act. We would like to know, does this mean that such businesses will have to meet the same requirements of other similar establishments, such as hotels, motels, and others relating to such matters as appropriate zoning, commercial taxation, and so on? We would recommend that designation regardless of the size of the operation. We note also that offering short-term rentals who have primary residence in those properties will not be required to register. Our only concern here is the definition of primary residence. Since it is such a key element, this may need some additional refinement. Does it refer to how often the owners reside in the property? Should there be a limit on the number of days it can be rented? I believe a number of communities around the country are facing similar challenges. One of those which we looked at was Victoria, BC. Their approach to short-term rentals focuses on primary residence only, and it may be instructive for ministry officials to confer with Victoria in that regard. In summary, what we're recommending is that neighborhoods and communities should be involved in consultation on the implementation of the Act. Nova Scotia Housing, NGOs, and others involved in the availability of affordable housing should be involved in further consultations on that implementation. Short-term rental owners who are not primary residents, as noted in the Act, should comply with all requirements relating to commercial enterprises. And lastly, we recommend that further work be done on the definition of primary residence, possibly with reference to the work done in Victoria. Thank you very much for your attention, and if there are any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from our group? You had a very thorough presentation. Ms. Roberts?
Thank you very much for coming down today. I wonder if you can speak to, I guess, the prevalence and the growth of short-term rentals in your neighborhood or in other neighborhoods. I wonder if you've you know, in conversation, I know you published a letter to the editor in the Chronicle Herald some months ago. I'm wondering if you've heard about, you know, how fast this is growing, how prevalent it is.
Mm-hmm. I don't really have the numbers for the city as such. As I say, the CBC reported indicated 3,800 province-wide. And my focus primarily has been on those that are really multiple units, because they indicate to me that they're non-resident owners. And essentially, to me, that's hotels. I know that in the Hydrostone area, it's been mentioned that there are 3 or 4 in that particular area, but I don't have the specific numbers for each area in the city, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick follow-up. As the MLA who represents the area, I'm very aware and always grateful to acknowledge that the Hydrostone, like many other kind of groups of housing stock in Halifax Needham, was built fully with public investment. The Hydrostone was built through public dollars after the Halifax explosion. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you just want to offer any reflection on that now it's you know, basically the purpose for which it was built is no longer in line with the use of at least this unit.
Yeah, I think it's been a long time. It's been 100 years or more. There's been a lot of changes in the Hydrostone in terms of its structure and buildings and so on, and no doubt the culture. And I think it's symbolic. Our particular area on our street, Hennessy Place, and our particular row of houses actually goes back to that particular period of time. And so we've tried to maintain that tradition both in terms of the exterior building and in terms of the neighborhood itself. It's a very unique design. I guess when I'm looking at this particular issue, I'm looking at the human aspect of neighborhood. And in our particular neighborhood, the way it was structured in those early days, back doors link on to other back doors and so on, which was a tremendous design. I think it's important to sort of maintain that kind of closeness if you can. And in this case, as I say, we basically are losing a spot in the neighborhood that someone could have lived in and contributed to, and perhaps will in the future. But when I look at province-wide, I'm thinking there are many communities that are facing the same kind of thing, and it's important that we act now to put some rules and regulations in place that may make it a more thoughtful transition.
Ms. Pond?
Thank you very much for your presentation and taking the time to come here today. This is a wonderful opportunity to be able to hear from people across the province. I sometimes wish that we had more time to allow people to be able to give their thought process on bills that are going to be enacted, that are going to be really changing the lives of people, everyday citizens. My question to you, and I'm very familiar with the Hydrostone, having lived in Halifax for 20 years, you mentioned affordability, and I'm familiar with the background, of course, why the Hydrostone would have been built in the first place. I don't think any of us here would disagree on the current assessment rates or price tags that one would have to pay to be able to purchase a home in the Hydrostone. It's a very favorable area to live, very beautiful, and it's a lovely neighborhood. So I'm not in disagreement with you with regard to the fact that a short-term rental would bring in obviously a different type of user than perhaps, you know, some of the closely knit community would wish for. But how exactly do you think that taxing these single residential buildings with a commercial tax rate would really change the usability as far as affordability, affordable housing? Because I can't imagine that there's very much affordable housing in that area to begin with.
The concern with looking at non-resident owned small rentals is that essentially they're like a hotel, and they really should be considered as a commercial enterprise. There's a gap in the law at present. Obviously, you're working to change that right now. But at present, those businesses can operate. There's no one living there. They're basically people who are visiting there every day. There's no restrictions on the number of visits that can be made during the year. For instance, in some communities around the country, one of the ways they're trying to deal with the situation is by limiting the number of days that can be rented in a primary residence. So my concern is that if it's a non-resident rental situation, that they should be treated as a business. If it is treated as a business, in my view, it is also in the wrong zone at the present time, which may have implications for this particular operation that I'm looking at, but may also discourage others from establishing non-resident rentals.
Thank you. We're at time here. That's good. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very thorough.
Thank you.
Mary Suto, And I'm guessing that I got that last name right. I was referring to legal counsel actually on it. Welcome.
Thank you.
So the floor is yours. We have 10 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for questions. And
Great.
Go ahead.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So I'm also a resident of the Hyderstone, and I rent a townhouse there with my husband and my new baby. Here, I'm in the back there. So we're new to the neighborhood, and in October we moved from the student area of the South End with the intention of living in a family-friendly residence. And when we first signed our lease, the property next door was vacant, but as of January, our unit is now attached to a full-time Airbnb. The owner of the property has been, open to hearing our concerns and done his very best to accommodate them, but we still are subject to a constant stream of strangers coming and going. So guests come and go all hours of the night, and in spite of being a non-smoking rental, we now share a back porch with a new set of people smoking each weekend. So like Mr. Stewart, I'd really like to recommend a focus on neighborhood impact apart from the tourism side of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Questions? No? Thank you. Ms. Claudia Chender.
Thank you. So you say you're new and you're renting. Mm-hmm. I know that one of the challenges that we have heard from people is that in other cities where non-resident Airbnbs and residential properties have become really common in urban areas, people are facing more and more sort of rent eviction, where landlords decide that it's more lucrative, and this maybe is to my colleague's point in the last exchange, to rent the property exclusively as an Airbnb than to rent it to one tenant for a year or longer. Mm-hmm. Have you heard stories like that, or is that something you're concerned about?
Yeah, I have become a good acquaintance of the gentleman that rents next door, and he's already gone above and beyond what we pay for rent in a month in his first, week, or in his first couple weeks of renting. So
it's a concern.
Yeah, definitely, especially as a young family trying to find something. When we talk about affordable housing, I mean, houses that are affordable for young families.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ms. Smith-McCrossan.
Thank you for coming today, and we could hear your baby. Very exciting. I think it's really interesting for you to share your perspective as a young family, so thank you for that. It's often a perspective that maybe is sometimes missed. I'm just wondering, do you have concerns for your safety, having strangers coming and going every day?
It's uncomfortable more than anything. The gentleman who owns the building or owns the home has put in security cameras, and I know that Airbnb has a way of keeping track of who the people are that are renting. Safety concerns, maybe not so much as just the discomfort of having strangers come and go constantly. And it's exhausting trying to be friendly to a new set of people every day.
Exactly. Ms. Pond.
It's like you're becoming part of the tourism experience for those people who are coming and going, unfortunately. I'd like to ask, because I know our tourism industry here is very seasonal. I think we're working towards, which is a wonderful thing, for it to become, more of a four-season tourism industry. But here in the urban core specifically, do you see that short-term rental is just rented out to a certain time of the year as a short term, and then, during that shoulder season between perhaps September to June, when there are students and, people who are here looking for full-time placement, that is rented in a different capacity to a full-time resident?
So you're asking, is it busier in the summer than it is in the winter? Am I fine? Is that?
If I may clarify, are you having different type of rental experiences in the spring, summer, and maybe early fall, and then going into a full-time rental, which I know happens quite a bit, in rural Nova Scotia,
Yes,
as opposed to having short-term all the time?
Right, I'm not sure. He only just started renting it in January, so I haven't gone through full season. But for example, the weekend is a great time for them to rent, whereas the weekdays are a little quieter.
Okay.
So if that's any indication. I'm not sure.
Thank you very much, Ms. Suto.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate your testimony here today. And our last presenter for 2 bills, Kathy Watson, who is with the Nova Scotia Bed and Breakfast Association. Kathy, welcome. So on Bill 101, the Tourist Accommodation Recommendations Act, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. As you know, my name's Kathy Watson, and I'm here representing the Nova Scotia Bed and Breakfast Association. The president is Larry McCormick, who lives in Truro and wasn't able to be here today. I own a bed and breakfast in beautiful Chester St. Margaret's. My MLA is sitting right here, but I'm on St. Margaret's Bay, very close to Peggy's Cove, so in a really high tourist area. So first of all, I'd like to say that we think it's a positive step that the Tourism Accommodation Act is being repealed and will be replaced by a simple online registration system, which we hope would level the playing field. It's also positive that the government will be requiring the online platforms to register in Nova Scotia. So these are things that NSBBA had asked for in the past. However, we are quite concerned that there will be no requirement for registration of short-term rentals within primary residences. So I have 5 questions that I would ask, and then a few concerns about that. So the first question is, with the online registration process, we're wondering if there would be any standards or criteria with which the property needs to comply, or will it be simply a matter of paying the fee? And that's kind of one of the questions also that was asked by the neighborhood. And number 2, since the government is asking Airbnb and other platforms to maintain records of financial transactions for 7 years, will there be any tracking of the registered properties, say by the Department of Finance, to see if the owners are actually declaring the income for tax purposes? And also, would the tracking of rentals within primary residences be possible, since they're not, or how would it be possible since they're not required to be registered? We were told there's a $1,000 fine for those who are renting out short-term accommodations without being registered, but there's no policing in force for that. So we're concerned about the enforcement. I understand then that the government will be relying on the public to report individuals if the public knows about them, but it's not clear who they would report to whom they would report, who would collect the fine, how that would be monitored if the property was actually still operating or not. And I think it could be quite costly, that enforcement could be quite costly. Since the online platforms will be required to register in Nova Scotia, will they in turn be expected to only list properties who are registered? Of course, that wouldn't apply to the ones in primary residences, but of the non-primary residences. And then our 5th question is about marketing. Since it will not be required for short-term accommodations within primary residences to be registered, would Tourism Nova Scotia market short-term accommodations that are in primary residences whether or not they are registered? I mean, would those properties then be on novascotia.com, be in the Doers and Dreamers Guide, would their information be distributed at the Visitor Information Centre? Right now, they cannot be, but if they're not requiring any primary resident accommodations to be registered, that's a concern of ours. So then I have some concerns. Minister McClellan was quoted in the Chronicle Herald on Friday as saying that the hotels and motels, and I really think this legislation does help the hotels and motels, built the foundation of tourism with their own risk, their own time, their own money. But that is also true of traditional B&Bs. We owners spend our own money, our own time, our own risk to build a foundation of exemplary accommodations and to meet provincial standards. But now there will be no provincial standards for short-term accommodation within primary residences. Like a lot of B&Bs had to add bathrooms, upgrade bathrooms, upgrade bedrooms, make sure they had a separate area for visitors to congregate. And, if there's no regulations, none of those things would be applied. And on a personal note, I think I haven't even got on to the other concerns yet, but on a personal note, this proliferation of unlicensed short-term accommodation may actually be driving me out of business. In 2018, I was 10% lower accommodation rate than the year before, and today I looked at my bookings to this point. To this point last year, I was more than 50% bookings to what I am this year. So if I'm going to be down 50% from last year, which I was already down 10%, really, I might not be able to afford to live on beautiful St. Margaret's Bay. But anyway, we also have heard many times that the quality programs and inspections which we belong to, which we're required to belong to now, either through Canada Select or Nova Scotia Approved, that are not needed because now tourists rely on the comments of other travelers on things like on the booking platforms or on sites like TripAdvisor. And then last week we were also, it was reiterated the importance of increasing room inventory because we're trying to increase tourism. So my concern is if we're using the need to increase inventory and the fact that people rely on those rating systems, if we're using those two things that we don't need to be licensed, I think this is akin to, and I really like this analogy, but it's akin to saying if we have a shortage of physicians in Nova Scotia, let's get away with licensing. Let's do away with licensing because people can rely on ratemymd.com. And if they see a bad physician rated on ratemymd.com, they won't go to him and we don't have to worry about him doing any harm, him or her. So professionals have licensing bodies for a reason. And I think bed and breakfast, licensed bed and breakfast feel like those licensing requirements would be a reason for bed and breakfast, because now we're expecting the public to check if the B&B has sufficient fire extinguishers, that the fire extinguishers are up to date, that the water's safe, that there's a fire escape plan, that have carbon monoxide monitors, and many other things that the quality inspectors actually check when they come to do our inspections. So those are my comments for Bill.
Could we ask the page to make copies of your notes?
Well, I didn't really do it like I think it's
in
got
particular,
my
those
notes on.
5 questions, I think it'd be nice if everybody could get a copy of those at the front.
Okay, you have to wait till I do my other one too, because...
Oh, I'm sorry. At the end then.
Well, just because it's on the same paper.
Yeah.
But I mean,
No
you can
problem.
ask, do you want to ask questions about Bill 101
Thank you.
first?
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. I feel like I remember when B&Bs were the new thing. And I guess I'm just for clarification, at this point, would members of the Nova Scotia Bed and Breakfast Association, would the great majority of them or all of them actually consider their B&Bs to be their primary residences?
They have to. That's the way the Tourism Accommodation Act was set up. It has to be our primary residence. We have to live there full time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so these changes to the regulation are particularly affecting you because it's not like there's a new bunch of hotels and motels. There's a bunch of new short-term rentals in primary accommodations. Okay. Thank you. I needed to clarify that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Ms. Pond?
That are currently looking to be enacted, is there anything in there that's going to be helpful to you as a B&B owner?
Well, it should be leveling the playing field in the fact that we don't need to be registered now either. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's helpful. I don't know. I've only been in the business for 8 years, but most of the members of the Nova Scotia B&B Association have been operating B&Bs for 15, 20 plus years. And they've seen, this proliferation of people not being registered, not being inspected, impacting their
So now you say that you will not have to be licensed because it's your primary residence. Is there any possibility of any B&B owners, if I know it's their primary residence, but if they go away for a certain time of the year on holidays? I mean, I know some people that have B&Bs and that they go away for, 4 or 5 months of the year. elsewhere where it's warm. Just wondering if there'll be anything in the regulations that will then impede someone from being able to do that. And I don't know how many rooms. Is there a threshold of how many rooms that someone can have as a B&B?
Yes, there is, and that's one of the things with the next act, with the Assessment Act. But right now, there's a threshold of a maximum of 4 rooms in your B&B. And I don't think going away in the winter changes it being your primary residence.
Thank you Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Kathy, thank you very much for being here today. I'm curious, we have seen a number of B&Bs close, I believe, in your area, our area. I'm wondering, have any of these moved from being B&Bs to being the short-term rental model? What is the impact to a B&B, a current B&B, to move over to a short-term rental business model?
The ones that I know of have closed is because they're in their 70s or 80s and they're retiring. So I don't know of any that have changed from being a licensed B&B to being just a non-licensed to short-term. I don't want to say Airbnb because there's many platforms, but there's, that might be the biggest. But no, any that I know personally haven't. Though there are some licensed B&Bs that do also advertise on Airbnb. They're using that as an online booking agent.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pond.
I ask, what is your average stay? Because I know with a short-term rental within the Act, it's going to be anything 28 days or less. So what would be the average stay that you would see as far as someone who's utilizing your bed and breakfast? Is it a one night? Is it a weekend? Is it a week?
It would be 1 night to 2 or 3 weeks. 2 or 3 weeks would be the maximum I'd have anybody. I have a lot of one-nighters. Yeah, on one of the platforms that I advertise on, I say minimum of 2 nights, but
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ms. Watson. Appreciate it. You can stay seated there.
Okay.
So that concludes our presenters for Bill 101, the Tourism Accommodation Registration Act. Ms. D. Costanzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 101, Tourist Accommodation Registration Act, to be referred back to the House without amendment. Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor to move the bill back without amendments. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. So our final bill is Bill 99, the Assessment Act. And seeing that you're a veteran, the floor is yours.
So my only concern about the Assessment Act is that there would no longer be that cap of 4 rental rooms for something to be considered a residential property. And so I had a question about why drop the cap of 4 rooms. We're really questioning where that ask even came from or why it seems to be necessary. And the concern is if a house or an inn that is the owner's primary residence is large enough to rent out 5 or more rooms, I think it could be a fire trap. And I understand, that the government would say this is part of the fire marshal's jurisdiction. But again, if there's no licensing because it's primary residence, is the government saying that it's up to the public to make sure that the same thing I said about the other, that there's adequate fire safety, because there'd be no inspectors or quality program coming into the house.
Yeah.
And really, you could have an inn with 15 rooms that the owner lives in, and that would be considered a residential property.
Thank you. Any questions in respect to that? Thank you very much. And again, if we could have a copy of your notes made for us, that would be appreciated. And Ms. Watson, thank you very much. So that concludes our presenters. Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 99, the Assessment Act, be referred back to the House without amendment.
There's a motion on the floor to move the bill without amendments. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. That concludes the business for law amendments today, and we stand adjourned.